So I was watching one of your older Tim Cast interviews,
Mhm.
and you can see the comment section. It's like a live feed, and in there are like overtly anti-Semitic comments. Just like people put it. And this is from 2 years ago. Uh, it's just in the open, not ashamed to behave that way. And then you see what's happening on college campuses and just in public in general. Why do you think that that seems to be one of the only tolerated forms of racism? Like, to me, that's really confusing because it wasn't that long ago when everyone was kind of up in arms over the whole BLM movement. And someone, what immediately I thought about was when a NASCAR driver had his garage open or something, and he had a tie, like a slip knot in the garage, and immediately they thought it was, a racist, like a node to like a noose or whatever, and it absolutely found out that was garbage. It got debunked right away. But like that was how quick everyone was to say like that's unacceptable. You can't do that. It wasn't even true, but you see blatant like Nazi signs on college campus buildings, and that's fine. Like the students are getting kicked out. You have professors saying that they were exhilarated and energized and excited over this, like, and they're not getting let go. So why is this like the last form of acceptable racism?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think perhaps because it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest. And um, and of course there's that whole paradigm of quote unquote intersectionality,
Hmm.
where the powerful are at the top, or the supposed assumed powerful at the top, the less powerful are at the bottom, that white people are always at the top of this intersectional um, paradigm, as I called it, and those people of color at the bottom. And for whatever reason, many much of the world has decided that Jews are white. We are not white. Um, there are true that about half are from Eastern Europe, Ashkenazi Jews, but many, including half of me, are what we say are Mizrahi, or from the Middle East. Half of me is from Persia. My grandparents were born there. Um, and of course, we have Ethiopian Jews and Sephardic Jews from Spain and other Hispanic lands. And yet, for some reason, we're seen as white and therefore oppressors. And the tiny little speck of Israel in the Middle East, and if anybody looks at a map and sees all the other countries, Arabic countries around it, it's a tiny little speck. Somehow that is the great oppressor of the Middle East. Um, and it's that I think once this idea of intersectionality became, well, it came out in the 70s, but it really became more popular in the last decade. And people are really learning about it, and they're deciding that Jews are white and therefore Jews are oppressors, and therefore whatever happened to Jews, they had it coming to them. Along with this language of oppression, of intersectionality, comes oppression, and comes colonizing and occupying and all of these things. Israel's not a colonizer, and is never looked to colonize other lands. And in terms of occupation, Israel left Gaza in 2005. In fact, literally dragged 9,000 Israelis from their homes in Gaza in 2005 until hostages were taken on October 7, 2023. There were no Jews living in Gaza. So what we've got is this lexicon of words that points a finger at Jews in this whole new sort of paradigm of anti-Semitism, which also then now leaps into anti-Zionism. And some have decided, well, it's different because it's against Israel, but of course, Israel's the Jewish state, and so anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, which doesn't mean you have to agree with the government, doesn't mean you have to agree with all the policies, just like you don't have to agree in any other country, including our own here in the US. But respect the fact that this is the Jewish state, and it has been, well, it's been for millennia, since literally biblical times, and in the modern era, officially since 1948.
Yeah, I was at a party recently, and I I don't know. I was just like I was stunned by certain people's comments over everything that's happening in Israel and in Gaza. And one young lady said, "You can't be kidnapped if you're trespassing." And I just said, "Whoa." Like, I immediately said, "Did you just?" And then I bit my tongue and I was like, that old Bible verse, which is don't cast pearls before swine, right? Like, just don't get into it with someone who's incapable of appreciating whatever it is that you're presenting and just recognizing that. And that's the situation I found myself in. And regardless of, again, like what politics you believe in, when you see like babies being taken, like how, like, it doesn't matter. That's clearly the bad guy. Whoever is kidnapping a baby is clearly the bad guy, and there is no justification, or you don't need to go back 100 years or 50 years or 5 minutes ago to know that that's the bad guy. And this weird, like, postmodernist place that we have kind of stumbled into as a society, or what a Western society, is just alarming, right? Like, there is no bad guy. You need to know his backstory. You know, men and women are exactly the same. Like, all of this mumbo jumbo to seem like you're intelligent when really all you're doing is just creating a mess, and a mess where people just cannot thrive or succeed, except for the people that are perpetuating these crazy ideas.
I agree. It's all part of the same cult of hate to use the term of wokeness. You know,
Hmm.
you have all of these words and all of these assumptions you're supposed to make. I mean, we have it certainly, you know, if you're a Democrat, you're supposed to believe certain things. If you're a Republican, you're supposed to, you know, agree with certain things. And of course, most of us agree with some things and not others.
Hmm.
And when it comes to this, the assumption is, well, okay, well, if Israel is filled with Jews, and Jews are white, and again, Jews are not white, then whatever they do, they must be the ones who are guilty and or deserving of whatever it is that's coming to them. And it's as if they can ignore any facts, any true history. And if one brings up the facts and true history, they decide that that just couldn't be true because it's coming from the mouths of the Jews, and the Jews are the oppressors. So you just keep going in circles. And it's so, again, all we can do is just keep trying to share the truth and, and, and do what good people do, which is um, well, you know, you mentioned I went to a rally. So I did. I went to Washington D.C. for the March for Israel rally. I don't know if it was a rally, but it was 300,000 of us, and not only from the U.S. I saw a lot of Canadians there. People flew in from all over the place to support, and people keep remarking. Even last night, somebody I met had been there. We kept saying, "Wow, look at us. We're so proud of us," because there was no litter, there was no violence. There's no screaming. There was all, it wasn't joy because we were there thinking about all the hostages, many of whom hadn't yet been released. Of course, many of them are still hostages of the soldiers who were on the front lines. And of course, the people who were the 1,200 people who were murdered, several they don't even know. They haven't even been able to identify their DNA, sadly, tragically. And yet, you know, here we were united, and there was this great feeling of of peace, having each other, even if we were just strangers, many of us to
Hmm.
each other, most of us to each other. So I I've just never been more proud to be a Jew than I was right there in that moment. And I think we just have to keep showing. I'm saying we Jews and allies, as many like to say, um, that we're better than destroying, than being violent, than harassing. You know, you talked about what's going on in the schools. I mean, I have a very you know a first degree relationship with a young woman who was in that Cooper Union Library.
Whoa.
And you know, this stuff is very personal. Everybody seems to now know somebody, whether here in the U.S. or in Canada, where I'm from. I'm from Montreal. The anti-Semitism there is becoming very violent. My high school building was shot up a couple of weeks ago. Thank God it was at night and nobody was there, nobody got hurt. Um, it's becoming very threatening. And even in the streets of New York City, where I live, 2 women were arrested for sort of pulling another woman, Jewish woman, to the ground because she asked why they were taking down the hostage posters. Um, it's becoming it is scary. I will say it is scary. Are we going to sort of relent and just hide? No, of course not. In fact, if anything, it is the thing that rallies 300,000 people to get together in the middle of the week. It is the type of thing that makes us keep hanging up those hostage photos, to keep tweeting about it, to have, a half-hour podcast just saying, what are you talking about? Like you did last week, Candice. So it's the time to be stronger than ever.